Hello and welcome to the Ego Chall Podcast, episode 58. We're back. It's been a while since we did our last episode, and we have quite a bit to talk about, despite it still being the off season. But before we get into any of the news that we're going to end up talking about today, how are you doing, Bink?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Good. It's been a while. I completely forgot what I usually do for these episodes because I don't typically talk to humans other than my girlfriend and possibly you at certain points. So um, you're really it's going to be a tough show for me, I think, but I think we'll get through it.
Yeah.
Let's get into the biggest news. Obviously, this is something that dropped late last week, and we haven't done a show in like a month and a half, or something like that. But the last show that we did, we covered the retirement of Crim6, three-time world champion, arguably the greatest Call of Duty player of all time. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about the announcement that Scump is going to retire after this upcoming 2023 CDL season. So he will be playing one final season and possibly more, depending on, I guess, some circumstances. But let's just get your thoughts real quick about, your thoughts on him announcing his retirement after the upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, this is just an announcement that any longtime competitive Call of Duty fan has known is coming at some point in, the not so distant future. And it was one of those things that it's just looming there, like the uncertainty of when it would happen existed. Nobody really knew what was gonna go down, but it's just something that fans have known could happen and have dreaded the thought of, and that reality happened. Uh, kind of on, kind of funny timing with how he did it on the launch day of MW too. So, uh, for those fans who, assuming that it was a pre-recorded video, um, that was planned and all that stuff. I mean, the video itself was pretty cool. Um, but assuming that video wasn't actually recorded on that day, there are people joking like, "Oh, MW2 hasn't even been out for 24 hours and it's already causing Scump to retire." Um, but the jokes and memes aside, it's obviously, like I said, just something that competitive fans have known could happen, would happen at some point. They want to, at least most people likely didn't want to accept the fact that it would happen at some point, but obviously it was inevitable. And it just so happens that, he's doing one final year. I know on Twitter and even in our work Slack, when um, the news of like the thumbnail was shared like 5 minutes before the video premiered on YouTube, people were speculating that he might not even compete this year. So comparatively, it's obviously more exciting that we're getting one final year out of him, a last dance, if you will. Um, so yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one. Um, Obviously, something we've talked about multiple times, but we haven't really gone in depth in, is just the impact that Scump retiring will have on the league, its viewership, and all that stuff. Um, and obviously, that's something we're going to see in 2023 when he actually retires. But yeah, I just think it's definitely it's good that he didn't drop that video and just say he's done. It's that would have been um, a real just shot to the heart for a lot of people. But the fact that he announced ahead of the season that he's got one more season in him is it's something we've seen from a lot of big name athletes. I know Jeter did it with his final season. Um, like even most recently, Albert Pujols just did it in baseball. So it's something you see with some of the most iconic faces in their sport and esports in this case. So um, I don't know if we'll, again, comparing to Jeter and Pujols and names like that, there were like farewell tours and stuff from like the places he visited for the final time and stuff. So that's a little different for the CDL, but it will be cool to see if there's any tributes or anything like that throughout the events this season. But getting a little ahead of ourselves there with that. I think, Scump's had a great career, arguably one of the best players of all time. Obviously, the one thing that holds him back from being at the top there is the fact he only has one world championship. So maybe he's able to get a second this year, go out on top, and then, even further solidify his legacy as one of the most dominant Call of Duty players of all time.
Yeah, definitely a big blow to competitive Call of Duty because we've had a lot of players and personalities kind of exit the scene over the past, say, 5 years. I mean, for me, in terms of like the hierarchy of like these iconic players, that when I think of competitive Call of Duty, I think of Nadeshot first and foremost, because like without Nadeshot, like who knows, even where Scump would have been, like in terms of the content stuff and just like the overall popularity of the space was definitely better off because of Nadeshot. But like right below Nade is Scump for me, because like those two players were really the face of competitive Call of Duty. Scump is still the face of competitive Call of Duty in my mind. And like you said, it would have been a really big blow, an even bigger blow to the competitive scene had he just said, you know what, like I'm not going to do it anymore, which, he's definitely within his right, because I'm sure it's very taxing, and he just got engaged to his fiance. So congratulations to him. And he's in his late 20s, which, in traditional sports, that's, the prime of your career. Definitely, like if you're 27, 28, you're expected to like really, be at the peak of your powers. But, we've seen it time and time again in esports, and specifically in competitive Call of Duty. When you get into your late 20s, like that's really when things, I don't even know if it's really going downhill so much as those guys start to just drop off. Like they stop playing, they stop trying to compete at the level that they previously did. I think of Karma, who was in his late 20s when he decided to retire, and he decided to retire mid-season because MW really sucked for him. And we've seen other players just kind of slowly drop off. Like JCap was like, he held on, and he definitely was on good teams and can contribute, but he just wasn't the same player. And I think at a certain point, like we really need to explore why that is happening so early for like these competitive esports players. Like, Scump is 27 years old. He'll be 28 whenever he decides to end up retiring. But like 28 years old, like that's ridiculous. Like LeBron right now, and obviously he's a very different example, but he's like 38 years old and still playing, and probably planning to play like into his early 40s. Tom Brady's like 111 years old, and I mean, he sucks now, but he was really good when he was 110. But like all these players in traditional sports, where like the wear and tear on your body is very real, like the injuries can really stack up. But like those guys seem to hold on into their 30s, sometimes into their 40s. And Scump, he's going to retire at 28. It just seems really weird that it happens like this. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but just the idea that we really lose these players to retirement, so to speak, so early on, like at least compared to traditional sports.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time too, you think about, these guys are, you think of someone like Simp, for example. Obviously, Scump was very young when he started playing too,
Mhm.
but that was before the age limit was instituted, so I won't use him as an example. But someone like Scump, who literally had to, or sorry, someone like Simp, who really had to wait until he actually turned 18 to be picked up by a pro team and start competing. Um, Even if you think about 18 being the start of his career, it's really even before that. He was playing S&D tournaments and stuff, 15, 16 years old. So
Mhm.
that's kind of more in comparison to traditional sports. That would be like, maybe like the college level thing in comparison. I don't really know. Not a great parallel there, but hopefully listeners understand what I'm getting at is where, although he's starting his pro career at 18, he's had, a couple years of amateur, however you want to phrase it, before that. So he's starting his career earlier than 18 and then playing, 18 to 28 or whatever. It's just that time is shorter than even these guys like Brady and LeBron playing 20 plus years. These esports players might not compete as long as professional athletes, but at the end of the day, they're starting a little younger, which again might not be a great example because even, obviously professional athletes are playing T-ball and Pop Warner, all that stuff very young. But yeah, I really just think it's for at least the examples that we've seen in Call of Duty that I know of. It really comes down to the determination and, for lack of a better word, the passion behind wanting to put in all those countless hours into grinding the game on a consistent basis. And the only other thing I was going to bring up too is just that Scump is in a very unique position himself. Although someone like Karma, even Crim6, who just recently retired and is doing the content stuff, Scump is just in a position as Scump to be sitting on a gold mine the day he retires to be able to kick back, create YouTube videos, stream to tens of thousands of viewers, get millions of views on his YouTube videos. Like, it's going to be a little different with his retirement in that sense, just because, he does have a large following, obviously, and he hasn't put out as much content as on a casual basis, and that can be attributed to how much fun he has playing the games. Like, this isn't Black Ops 2 where he was able to jump into a video and drop 100-0 gameplay, and really have a fun time with it. So we haven't seen that as much from him. Maybe that'll change. Maybe he gets into Warzone 2 a little bit, depending on how Warzone 2 goes. Who really knows? But he can also, he can do anything. Any game he plays, tons of people are going to watch him. So he's in a really good position post-retirement. And one thing I will say is I don't think, although I think he could be a really good coach if he decided to go down that route post his playing days, I would be surprised if he is a coach. I don't think that is what he wants to do. It doesn't seem like he's ever made any indication or had any interest in that. I would think it would be interesting if he owned a team. I don't think if it would be something like Nadeshot where he goes out on his own. What I could see happening in the very, very far future is Hex stepping away from Optic on like a full-time basis and kind of, just handing the reins to Scump in a similar ownership perspective. But I think that's many years down the road if it happened. But there are just a ton of interesting possibilities for what we could see from Scump once he actually does retire. It's just a matter of what he wants to do, and the options seem like they're almost endless at this point. So although a lot of people will be upset to no longer have him competing, it is certainly he even said it himself in his video that he's not going anywhere and people are still going to see from him. So that's a little bit of a silver lining there for Scum fans.
Yeah, definitely. I think it would just be foolish for him to completely abandon what got him so popular and what has made him, quite honestly, a lot of money. Because I just think right now competitive Call of Duty is sure, they're getting paid a lot of money, the top end players, probably more than they bring in from just a logical standpoint. But at the end of the day, you pay for Scump because he's the most popular player in the world. And it also doesn't make a lot of sense for him to stick around competitive Call of Duty when he could be making so much more money by doing content. We've, seen the leaked numbers for how much money some of these Twitch streamers make on a monthly or a yearly basis. And Scump doesn't even really get to do all of that nearly as much or do the things that he probably would, especially in terms of sponsors, because I believe the CDO has to kind of approve of sponsors and they can, veto certain things if they feel that's what they want to do. But truthfully, I think that he will be so much better off and he'll be really in a good place in terms of, just making a lot of money. somewhat like Zuma. Zuma has completely blown up from like a content perspective because he's went 100% into it, and he's been able to do everything that we thought like these players should be doing. Like, and I want to say one more thing just about the content stuff is like, I remember in Black Ops 2, in Ghosts, when Nadeshot was around, and people said he doesn't spend enough time playing the game and practicing. That's why his team's results are, subpar or whatever. He's doing too much content to really get the success. And I think Scump has sacrificed a lot of the content and a lot of the money or the fame that would have come with that, because he wants to win championships and he wants to kind of improve that legacy that you mentioned, because that's definitely the only thing that is holding him back. Like, he has the big tournament wins, like he has a lot of those. He's obviously probably in the top 5 or 6 most wins in terms of tournaments, but in terms of champs wins, he has 1, and then there's Crim6, and there's Clay, and there's Karma, and of course he was teammates with all 3 of those guys. So, when you compare the 4 of those players, he kind of comes out short because he doesn't have at least 2 rings. But maybe that changes with this upcoming season. As far as like his, I think you did a really good job in your article, because I think a lot of people will have this question where they're not completely tuned into Call of Duty esports on a day-to-day basis, so they don't really know why Scump is really retiring. And I thought it was interesting, his quote, and it really ties into kind of like that grinding mindset that you talked about. He said, I just think that my time, my effort, and my energy one last season is pretty much all that I got left in the tank in terms of my mental, all that stuff. I think that I have one more good year to give to not only myself, but my teammates, first and foremost, my coaching staff, my amazing partners, and the people I work with at Optic, and you guys, the Green Wall. I just think like it's insane that a 27-year-old, or that even like, let's just say like a guy that's played like and really is at the top of their game, or not in terms of like individual level, but there's a real chance that Optic wins champs this year, because there was a real chance that they would have won it this past season had Illy not been out with his injury and then kind of having their season upended. But just for him to say like, I only have one more season, like it will zap me of all of my energy to give one more season, that really just says so much about how bad some of these Call of Duty games have been, to like completely gnaw at one of the best players of all time, to the point where he's like, yeah, I'm done after this. I can't do it again. Just the same way that Karma was like, yeah, I'm done. Middle of the season, I'm done, because I don't want to continue to play this game on a day-to-day basis. I just, I mean, you're the one that's played MW2 so far, so I'll let you, talk about that. But I'm kind of bewildered at the fact that he's just so done with it, and he only has one more year left in him.
Yeah, I think the interesting, I wanted to, when I was writing the SEO article on his retirement, I wanted to go back and look at, because he's talked about retirement so many times at this point now. I wanted to go back and look at some of his other videos and quotes about it, but I just decided to go with what he said most recently. So I hope I'm not incorrectly saying this, but I feel like I vaguely remember in one instance he said that he wanted to be like one of the players who goes out on his own terms and not like, keeps trying to play to the point where he's being a detriment or costing his teammates and, putting up bad numbers and only playing for the sake of playing. Instead, he doesn't want to get to that point. He wanted to retire, before it gets to that point, which, if he was playing into his 40s, obviously he wouldn't be as good as he was when he was in his young 20s like that. Just it might not be something some people want to hear, but it would make sense if that was the case. So I hope I remember that accurately. I'm not 100% sure, but if that is the case and that's something he has said, it would make even more sense that he's announcing like before the season that his retirement, as opposed to like retroactively, like Crim Six, being in a situation where he still wanted to play a little bit but wasn't able to get on a team, so then he was forced to make the decision to retire. That obviously wouldn't happen with Scump, because Scump would be on Optic as long as he wants to, and it just so happens that after this year, it seems like he doesn't want to compete anymore. We can really quick talk about too the caveat that he said on stream today. So initially he dropped the YouTube video. It was also a Twitter video, which was a short 2-minute video. If you guys haven't watched it, definitely check it out. It's just like him like kind of going through some moments in his life and stuff. It had one of those cool old Scump vlog videos when he was a little kid opening the Christmas present. He's like, "Thanks, Mom." And it had like sound bites like that from other videos he's posted and tournament winning reactions. But after that, he posted the video, just a Twitter video talking about why he retired and directly addressing, or why he is planning to retire, and directly addressing that. And that's where you got that quote from. But he also had a quote in that same Twitter video where he said, "Hopefully we can make this year one to remember for you guys, but indefinitely it does not matter. We could go win champs. We could win every fucking tournament this year." I only swore because he did. "This is my last one. I think that it's time for me to move on and start pursuing some other things that I've really wanted to do." So that's what he said in his Twitter video on October 28th. And then just a couple, like 4 hours ago, we had that video where he comes out with the stream clip of him saying that, he didn't even think like he really thought about it, because at the start of the clip he's saying, people are like, "If you win every tournament this year, you're going to stay." And I'm like, "No, I won't." I mean, that would be incredibly effing difficult as well. And then he kind of thinks for a second. He goes, "Okay, if we win every tournament, I'll play again." And we don't know how actually genuine that is. I would totally, not be surprised if Optic even did win every single tournament this year and he still didn't play in 2024. But at the same time, as he himself admits in that quote, it would be so difficult for Optic to win every single tournament. And now Vanguard might be a little different. Obviously, we haven't had enough time yet to see MW2 at a very competitive level yet. But compared to Vanguard, it was just such a coin flip game where, outside of FaZe making it to the grand finals and not winning, it was always different winners, a lot of different matchups. And that just is a testament to the talent in the CDL at this point. And, no expansion, only 12 teams. So all the teams, for the most part at least, are extremely competitive. And that would just make winning every single tournament in a given year incredibly difficult. Even if you look at FaZe and Cold War, they're considered one of the most dominant teams in recent memory, and they didn't even win every tournament that year. They, won a lot of them, but they didn't win every single one. So I think it's interesting that Scump said it on stream, and it's something that a lot of his supporters can be like, "Oh yeah, now he wins every single one. They win Major 1, like fans are gonna be really excited. Then they win Major 2, like they're gonna keep getting a little bit more hope." But I really think even if they somehow pulled off the immaculate season, winning every single tournament this year, based on the initial quote from his video on Friday, it seemed like at that point that his mind was made up, and indefinitely he wouldn't be competing after this season.
Yeah, I actually kind of think that he would play another year if it did go the way, like where they win. I think they're doing 5 majors this year, so all 5 majors and then win champs. I just think like at that point you're like, I might have another year in me. Like I want to at least see what the game is going to be like, because at that point, like there is a definitely a an avenue where you could be like, I went out on top. I did what no other player, what no other team has done before. But you can also be like, but we can also win champs next year as well. And then if you win champs next year, obviously, like back-to-back years, Scump is now a 3-time world champion, and undoubtedly, like in my mind, probably at that point,
He would be number one.
yeah, he'd be the best player of all time.
Yeah.
So it like I like you said, I don't think it's gonna happen. I don't think at this point any team will probably do it. At least for like a few years, it would really have to be a super stacked roster, and some things going wrong for other teams that they just can't seem to even win a single tournament. But like you said, like if FaZe couldn't do it in 2021, there aren't many teams ever that could really do it. Especially now that there are so few teams at the top, so the talent is kind of spread out.
I will say, though, there is an interesting wrinkle that could be thrown into this with the report that potentially there is no new Call of Duty game for the following year. In a situation where Scump and Optic win every single event in MW2, there's no Treyarch title next year, and the 2024 season is played on MW2, I will retract what I say, and if he's won every tournament in MW2, I think he would compete in the second season of MW2, just because, I mean, if you're so good at the game, I would be so surprised if you just walked away from it. But obviously, this scenario that we're talking about here is something that I guess is a little bit extra incentive. I don't know if that's really the right word for the situation, but it puts a little more meaning on every single one of their matches. If at Major 1 Optic get eliminated and the semifinals, or if they just get eliminated in general, then everybody's like, oh well, now there's no shot of Scump coming back next year. It's really over. So I just think we'll. Outside of the scenario where we do see Optic win every single event, most fans are going to be looking forward to cherishing these last few tournaments from Scum.
Yeah, definitely, especially when we get to the Texas Major, which I think is like the third or fourth major of the season.
Third, yeah.
So, the fans are going to be absolutely insane for that. And last season we saw that Optic won the Texas Major. So if that happened again, man, it would be incredible. I did see that people were saying that Dashy needed to uninstall Valorant this year because it's Scump's last season, so he needs to be locked in. It's just been a really weird offseason for Optic, from dropping half their roster to picking them up back 24 hours later, and now Scump announcing his retirement. Just been a really weird offseason, but there's just a lot of talent on that team, and I definitely think they have to be, one of the favorites to win champs this year, even before we really even get to see these teams in action in MW2. But another team that actually probably will win champs, the Las Vegas Legion. They obviously are moving from Paris to Las Vegas, their first season in Vegas, and the Legion announced their 2023 CDL roster on October 7th, so over 3 weeks ago. And the Las Vegas Legion's roster is Temp, Clayster, TJ Haley, and Prolute. So Prolute was the substitute and fill-in for Optic Texas last season. TJ was on the Boston Breach, and Clayster, mostly spent the season on the bench for the New York Subliners. And then Temp is actually a holdover from the Paris Legion's last season roster. Definitely their best player last year, and what was, inarguably the worst season in Call of Duty League history. I'm not trying to put him down or anything. I'm just saying, like, the team was really bad. But I'm like, we've been on, off and on, I guess, the Paris is winning champs bandwagon for 3 years now, going into our 4th season in the CDL. But I'm all on the Vegas is winning champs bandwagon. not been shy about saying how much I love Clayster and how he's my favorite player. And this team might have a little bit of some potential. I saw on the day one tournaments, they won like 3 back-to-back tournaments. Like I think they won a 4v4, or maybe 2 4v4s and then a 3v3. So I think it's sealed. Like we just call it a day right now. The Vegas Legion are going to be the 2023 CDL champions, right?
Yeah, I mean, might as well not even play the season out.
There we go. See you, Scump. We don't need you anymore.
No, but I think the most interesting aspect of this team has to be Clayster, right? Like you said, was on the bench for second half of the season last year. And especially with the Crim 6 situation and him not being able to find a team, there were questions around whether Clayster was going to find his way onto another team as well. And he's getting a shot here to show what he's capable of in a year where preemptively Scump is announcing his retirement. This could potentially be Clayster's last shot as well. So obviously he hasn't said anything about him retiring anytime soon. But he obviously is one of the older players. So it's something that, like we were talking about with Scump earlier, it's something that will happen at some point. It's just a question of when. So I'm excited to see Clay and Temp play together. I think depending on the meta we see in MW2, will be interesting to see how they work together as presumably the AR duo, but it could also be, a situation where Temp likes the subs better. I thought he was trying to be a main AR on the team that he was trying to form for this upcoming season. I think that was just speculation, nothing official or anything like that. But so I'm a little interested to see how that dynamic works between him and Clay, just because obviously, Temp is, even if he wants to be a main AR, he definitely has the ability to, still slay out on a sub, whereas Clay, he could do it, but I just feel like it would be, if one of them is going to have to flex around, it would be more suited to Temp than Clay himself. So excited to see what this roster is capable of. Like you said, first season in Vegas, going to be looking to put, the unsuccessful seasons of Paris behind the franchise and try to, start anew with new location, even though they don't really have new branding or anything like that. But, like you said, day one success, obviously, doesn't necessarily translate to them winning champs, but for the Vegas' winning champs crew, certainly hopes are higher than they were really at any point last year.
Yeah, and to kind of, when you said like it could be Clay's last year, it could be, and he's literally the oldest player in the CDL right now by over 2 years, because he's 30, and Classic, who now we got to talk about this as well, but he's now trying to reverse the jinx and stuff. But Clay is actually 2 years older than him. That I just think that's pretty wild. Like we talked about Scump, he's 27, he'll be 28, but Clay's gonna turn 31 during this season. Hopefully, I mean, if he, like we were talking about with Scump, if he was able to win 2 more titles, and do whatever, like he'd obviously be the best. But like Clay, he's only got to get 1 more, and what better way to do it than win it with the Legion, which would make him the best player of all time, because he's literally like resurrecting a dead team and leading them to a championship, which would be really, really, really cool. Obviously, coming back from a really bad season for them last season. But yeah, I think this Legion team, you don't really know how they're going to play, because I heard about teams last year, like before the CDL season began, and coaches and other players were saying like, oh, they're a lot better. They were saying that about the Paris Legion, and it's like, yeah, I mean, were they though? Like, I mean, they were arguably the most consistent team last year, because they just kept losing matches, and like I don't think anybody can really, like when it comes to these online matches where there's a lot riding on each individual match, I don't think there's a lot of predictions really that can be made, especially with these newer games where everything seems to be a coin flip and teams kind of trade wins every now and then. So I don't really know what to expect from the Legion, but it's definitely not a bad thing that they were able to take a few day one tournaments. It's a good thing. They probably made more money in those tournaments than the team did from wins last season. So, I mean, congrats to them. Let's talk about the classic thing while he's on the mind. So obviously we've talked about this so many times on this show, really, because it's a true jinx or a true counter if you're into that. But the Atlanta FaZe announced their substitute for the 2023 season. It is classic, and that means that the Atlanta FaZe are winning champs for sure now, because they have no counters left in the league. I mean, I guess we should probably explain this a little bit just to the people that maybe aren't like super in tuned with COD Sports, but basically Classic, every time he's essentially played FaZe, his team seemed to win. Like kind of, I don't know what the exact record is, but it's bizarre for like, especially because he was on Seattle's bench last year and Seattle kept winning. So it made it even funnier that they kept beating FaZe for some reason. But now he is joining FaZe, and he's pretty much made them unstoppable. What do you think about Classic getting signed to the team?
Yeah, so I think, for the sake of explaining the meme, it really started with that final major of the Cold War season where Seattle had absolutely nothing to play for. They couldn't qualify for champs, and so that major was their, essentially was their champs. And FaZe, obviously, as we just talked about earlier, were the most dominant team. Nicky D just goes off in the final map. I don't remember the scoreline, but I'm pretty sure he had a really good Game 5 on standoff search and destroy to help Seattle eliminate Atlanta from the tournament. And that might have been the only time they didn't make a grand finals in that season too, because I think they won like major 1, 3, and 4. They lost to Toronto in the finals. Then they didn't make it there, and they won champs. So it could be wrong on that, but it was definitely their worst placing. I'm fairly confident in saying it was their worst placing of Cold War because of that. And that match kind of started the whole meme of the curse of Nicky D, aka Classic. And then, like you said, it kind of translated over into Seattle the following year in Vanguard. Even though he wasn't playing, Seattle saw a lot of success against FaZe. So. With the meme aside, though, I think this is just a really good move. I've always thought highly of Classic as a player just because he's a versatile player. Most people look at him as one of those guys who's going to do the dirty work and stuff like that, but he's even at points been able to pull out an AR. He can just do what it takes to win, and he was one of those guys on like the Luminosity teams and stuff like that where they weren't necessarily dynasties winning a ton of tournaments each year, but they were guys like him, Slack, Looney were like winning like one tournament a year on multiple different titles, which speaks volumes, in my opinion, at least, to just their ability to consistently compete across the game, changing each year. So I've thought highly of Classic as a player. I think it makes sense too. Last season with Arcity, Pristini being the sub, people thinking that it might just be a brother thing, which could have been the case certainly. But even if Arcides wasn't on that team, if Pristini was the sub, it would have made sense to me because he's another one of those players known more as a sub, submachine gun player who can, he can pull out an AR at times. He can do the dirty work, that sort of thing. And I think that's just what you're looking for as a sub. And in comparison to a situation like Florida, for example, maybe where they have Dave Patty as their sub, he's really just like a main AR, and we haven't seen him compete on a SMG, so I'm not going to speak to that. But I just think with the limited bench spots that CDL teams are using at this point, having a versatile slash flexible sub is just a valuable asset in case of any emergencies.
Yeah, and he also proved that like he's still a winning player, won the Challengers finals. Like that's a major accomplishment. And Brack, because he was also on that team, he got picked up by Florida. So like I like that, even if it's just a substitute, obviously Phased doesn't plan on using Classic in any real situation. But I think that rewarding those players that do end up going down to Challengers or haven't been to the Pro League but are really excelling in Challengers, like those players should be rewarded, and I think that's what's happening with Classic. Obviously, he's also a very well-liked teammate by pretty much every team that he's been on. Like people speak very highly of him, which is always a good thing, and definitely something as a substitute. Like, you don't want someone that isn't well liked to be on the bench and kind of waiting their turn to replace you, like as a player. So, and the video that FaZe did announcing his signing is really incredible. Slasher talking about the Nikki D curse and how he was haunted by Classic, and he felt like Classic was in the room. That stuff's great, and I'm glad that more teams seem to be doing, more content, like with their roster announcements or their schedules and stuff. Like we saw with, I think it was Seattle did a really good one as well. What were you saying?
I mean, I was just going to say, even, outside of stuff like that, we just saw today, FaZe did a costume video and Celium was dressed up as a snake. I thought that was incredible.
It's a shame he didn't get a costume for Halloween. I stole that joke from, I think, Tactical Rap. But yeah, I love that stuff. It definitely helps the CDO just like, seem more legitimate and more fun throughout the season. We should also talk about the London Royal Ravens because they took about an eternity to announce their roster or just any kind of news regarding their roster. But the Royal Ravens, which will be the only team from Europe this season, so they announced their upcoming team for the 2023 season. So Nasty, Trey, Paul X, Asim, and Scraps will be the London Royal Ravens roster. Let me get your thoughts on this because, Nasty and Trey and even Paul X is, not too big of a surprise because they've all, played together before. But Asim and Scraps coming into the fold, what do you think?
I think Scraps is the really surprising move here. Surprising might not be the right word, but it's surprising not that he's on London, just surprising that he's actually back in the CDL now after taking a year off of not really competing in Vanguard. We saw him compete for London in the past. He was on Paris and Cold War, I believe. So it's good to have him back. He's a solid player and an even funnier guy. And, after losing a figure like Crim 6, although his interviews are irreplaceable, Scraps' interviews are I would say like a tier below, and it would be a good substitute as opposed to not having anything like Crim 6's interviews at all. But the interesting part about this is that London seemingly hasn't announced an actual 4-man lineup. They just announced the 5 players. On paper, to me at least, it would make the most sense if Scraps is the sub, at least heading into the season, because as I mentioned, he wasn't competing really last year. And from a roster construction perspective, you would have in a traditional 2 sub, 2 AR meta sort of deal, you would have Asim and Nasty as your subs, Paul X as your flex, and then Zero as your main AR. So I think that's most likely the 4-man lineup we see, those 4, and then Scraps on the bench, at least heading into the year. But, most people who've seen Scraps play know how talented he is, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if the London roster initially struggles that we see Scraps quickly inserted into the lineup at some point. It's just And it could be a situation too where they announce these 5 players and they try multiple lineup combinations at the start of MW2 here to see what works best. We're just gonna have to wait and see. Actually, we won't have to wait too long as opposed to other Call of Duty League seasons, but you know, tomorrow's November 1st, so as of tomorrow, the first event is just over a month away. So we shouldn't have to wait too long to see, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a situation where we see London trying multiple rosters. I also wouldn't be surprised if we just see them have those 4 guys, like I said, Asim, Nasty, Zero, and Paul X as the 4-man and Scraps on the bench. But we'll just have to keep an eye on that and see what squad they have going into the first event.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see that Paul and Asim ended up on rosters after being left out of their respective teams, Asim and LAG, and Paul in New York. Obviously, New York was a dumpster fire just with all the stuff that was going on in regards to like the roster drama, and it felt like he wasn't going to be back if Hydra was going to be back. It didn't feel like that was resolvable at least in terms of in New York. But I'm glad that he has that London connection from subbing in previously for the Royal Ravens, so that maybe that helped him get the spot. And I think I probably would have rather seen a Challengers player make their way into this roster. Maybe in like not even in replace of Scraps, but just maybe in addition to him. I think Challengers players, especially in Europe, like they are not getting a lot of chances because there's only one European team, and not a lot of NA teams are really looking to add a European Challengers player to their roster, although Beans did make it onto the Boston team. But
Wardy.
And Wardy. I probably would have rather had a Challengers player who grinded all through last year, where Scraps, I think he did one Challengers tournament last season and mostly stuck to Warzone and streaming. So it's very weird that they're going with him, but it could also just be the simple fact like they know that obviously London knows him from him being on the roster previously, and probably a lot of chemistry with at least Zero, I would imagine. But I don't know about the other guys. I think New York also announced their roster, which we've pretty much already known. But Hydra, Kismet, Skies, Priesta, and Sender moving from Optic to New York as the head coach. Any thoughts on that?
I'm pretty sure he's just an assistant coach. I don't think they actually
announced that he was head coach.
Yeah, I think D-Real is still the head coach, and Sender is an assistant. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Regardless, I think this is a team that has potential. Obviously, we've talked about Hydra in the past, how talented he is. Kismet looked really strong at the end of last year for that New York team, which after all the drama unfolded, we now know potentially how difficult it was to play in the circumstances of that team and do as well as Kismet did. So I think that speaks volumes to the potential that Kismet could continue to show. And that's just a sub-duo I'm excited to see. Out of game things aside, Hydra and Kismet is a scary duo right up there with, obviously you got Simba Beezy, Shotzi, and Scump, and then the other one that I've talked about on the pod that I'm really looking forward to seeing is Kleenex and Standy. But I would put Hydra and Kismet right behind them, just on that initial who I'm looking forward to seeing at least. I'm obviously leaving people out, but regardless of that, I think the roster has potential too. Priesta, I think this is a big year for him, kind of like a down season last year. So he's going to be looking to probably prove any doubters wrong. He's another guy who's just a glue player, and has shown, especially with that FaZe roster in Black Ops 4, literally showed that he was capable of playing any role. And then that led to him getting picked up by 100 Thieves, and 100 Thieves seeing success with him on the squad. And that's just one example of Priesta being able to do multiple roles, do multiple things on the team. So I think this squad has potential. Obviously, Skies too. There's a really strong Slayer. Was in a situation last year where maybe the roles didn't suit him as opposed to now he's on a New York team where there really isn't another main AR. I guess, Priesta could maybe want to be a main AR, but outside of that, he doesn't have to worry about main AR reps. He's going to be that guy holding down the AR duties on this New York lineup. So squad's got potential. Just going to have to wait and see, I guess, what we get out of them. And at least for New York's sake, I hope whatever was going on behind the scenes last season, they just put in the rearview mirror, completely forget about it, and move on to a fresh start here in 2023.
Before we get out of here, do you want to give your thoughts on what I think might be game of the year, Modern Warfare 2, the outpouring of support and the just the adulation that fans seem to have about MW2? Is that your thoughts as well?
Yeah, I mean, jokes aside, I've actually had fun playing the game. How do I want to phrase this? It's it's definitely not my favorite Call of Duty of all time, and it's still very early. The launch was inarguably one of the biggest disasters that we've had for a Call of Duty launch in recent memory. We literally had the first night just completely unable to play in parties of multiple people. But we had 7 people on for the launch on Friday at midnight Eastern time, and I was playing with just my cousin Chris and the rest of the boys who watched the pod, like Trem, Jim, Mike, Nick, and Josh. They were trying to play in a group of 5, and my cousin and I were only in a group of 2. Didn't have any problems. We played for like 2 hours till he got off and went to bed. And then I tried to join their squad, and they said they were having issues all night getting matches with that many people. And then when I tried to play with them, we were still having issues of people disconnecting and stuff. So they inevitably fixed the party issue, I think, yesterday. Maybe late on Saturday, but the days kind of blended together. No, it was definitely yesterday. But even outside of that, there's just a ton of things missing. You can't even check your combat record or your stats or leaderboards right now. Like, that just seems like a fundamental aspect of a Call of Duty title, but for some reason in 2022 it's missing. There's a ton of stuff that, the crashing issues, PC players getting scan and repair still. Outside of the actual gunplay and the gameplay, which I haven't completely hated, there's just a lot of issues with the game that need to be addressed immediately. If Infinity Ward and Activision are going to salvage this. I know there's already reports out there that this is one of the most successful launches from a monetary standpoint and sales like that, but you're not going to retain the players if they're struggling with the user interface and the menu's too complicated. They can't even look at their win rate or their KD. Like, there's a lot of issues. If anybody listening is interested in reading more about some of the issues and some things that other people are thinking could be improved with the game early, you can go to .esports. I know Scott, our lead writer for Call of Duty, has done at least 2 opinion pieces today on things that could be improved in the first update and things that are just absolutely missing right now for no seemingly explainable reason. So definitely go check that stuff out if you guys are looking for more content around MW2. But yeah, just right now it's still early. Giving the game a chance. I haven't even really played competitive yet. Maybe after this, I'll play a couple GBs with Trem to be able to say next time on the show what I think about that from a competitive aspect. But I think right now, at a very basic level, there are very simple things that the developers need to work on in the immediate future to improve the experience with MW2.
I feel like I've heard a lot of the maybe not specific things about not being able to see the combat record and so on. Maybe I haven't seen or heard those complaints in the past as much, but in terms of just, the game not being prepared for the number of players or whatever the players are actually trying to do, I've heard that whatever, 5-6 years in a row. Like, it seems every year there seems to be another issue, something that really holds back the player experience on launch. Of course, I'm not playing, so I can't speak to that firsthand. I just follow like 500 Call of Duty players and, journalists and friends that play the game, and there's very little positive feedback about this game, as far as I can tell. I'm sure some people are having a lot of fun with it, but it's really disheartening as a Call of Duty esports fan, not necessarily a Call of Duty fan anymore, but like as a Call of Duty esports fan, the game really should be good for my entertainment. That's usually the best games. Like I love Black Ops 2. I will watch old Black Ops 2 tournaments if I need to, because that game was fun to play. It was fun to watch. And when players are having a lot of fun, especially the competitive players, when they're having a lot of fun, it's usually a lot of fun to watch as well. And we're just not having a lot of fun. Maps are being copyright striked, which is a ridiculous thing that is happening. And obviously, like all the bugs that are being worked on are just simple oversights, which I'm sure some of those things can be explained as bugs, but some of those things are just, they for some reason just didn't think about it. They didn't really focus on it, and that's disappointing, and a real slap in the face to the people that shell out $60+ on a game that isn't even really finished. That just feels very disrespectful to the average consumer. But yeah, I hope that you have fun. I hope that you and Trem absolutely smoke a bunch of the children that are trying to play GBs for the first time in MW2. But I feel like it's going to be a struggle getting through some of those lobbies. I don't know if you have anything else before we get out of here. But
no, wrap it up.
Yep. So let's just wrap it up. Subscribe or follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, on Apple or Spotify specifically. Follow us on Twitter at jbink with 2Ks, at Pres Byers, and the podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. I'm not sure when the next show will be. Obviously, it'll be in the next few weeks because the CDL season actually starts in just over a month, so we don't really have a lot of time, a lot more time at least, for the off season and the downtime that comes with it. But we will be doing a season preview before the season gets underway at some point. Probably the end of November. I don't know how that lines up with the holidays or whatnot, but I feel like we could sneak in a season preview. And if anything big drops, maybe we'll do another one in the time being, maybe to check in with Bink's thoughts on MW2 as he gets to play a little bit more, and maybe get our thoughts from Ego Chall correspondent Tremor about how much he hates the game. Yeah, that does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yeah, you said what I was going to say. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. I think, we're still, like Preston said, in a month of flux, but obviously before the first event. The first event starts December 15th, I think, Major 1 in Raleigh, and I think the qualifiers for it start December 2nd, so we would likely do a show before that, but obviously Thanksgiving is right before December 2nd, so like he said, it'll be depending on the dates, all that stuff. And if anything happens in the next week or two, major that we need to talk about, we might make an appearance then. So best way to keep up with that, follow us on Twitter, follow Ego Chall account on Twitter too, and we'll keep you guys up to date on when we're going live next. So that's all I got. Thank you guys for tuning in, and remember to send the chow.